control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I'll be talking about an episode of The Outer Limits called Moonstone, or The Moonstone, depending on what source you read. Moonstone. Season 1, Episode 24, directed by Robert Florey, who I believe directed several other things. I'm going to have to check that in a sec and come back to you. First aired on March the 9th, 1964. It was production code 13 in the actual recording, but in the development, but it actually aired as episode 24. Yeah, Robert Florey's kind of interesting because he was around in the early talkie days. He must have been fairly old at this point. He directed, I think, some of the very earliest films of the Marx Brothers. The Coconuts specifically. The first Marx Brothers film. Not one much talked about because I think it was lost for quite a while, but he reappeared. He also directed The Murders of the Rue Morgue from 1931, I believe. So he has been around quite a while and, you know, had some sort of kudos in horror, I guess. He also made some Tarzan films and stuff like that. A jobbing director from the sound of it, really. Now, direction was okay in the internal scenes. There was some really good shots and special effects, actually. I quite like the weird creatures. They're just eyeballs, floaty kind of eyeballs. And they did that effect by, I think, painting ping pong balls and decorating them and kind of floating them in tanks. So the sort of the filaments around them moved in a sort of wispy, floaty way. And it's kind of a cool effect. But they are quite small creatures. That is one of the points of this particular story. Now, essentially, people are on the moon. They're talking about the introductory tech. Words sort of suggest they're talking about moon as eventually being the stepping stone for humans to colonise the rest of space, but they're setting up a moon base to do all this. But they found this perfectly round, what could be a rock. It's kind of egg-shaped, really, but it turns out it's a small spaceship. And they find out by various communications there's alien life forms in there who introduce themselves. They are the greatest minds in the universe, is what they claim, and they're from the home planet. Their home planet is Gripia, and they say they were their home planet was taken over by the tyrants, is what they call it, and they were tried to escape, but they only had enough energy to get to the moon. The sun apparently didn't give them enough energy to continue, or something like that. And it's a very inconsistent storyline that they say things to fit the plot that don't actually make sense. Like, so they got enough energy to get on the moon, exist for however long, and they do various other things, which indicates a very powerful energy source, but claim they haven't got much energy. But they also claim that they're a sort of like a scout ship, and their main ship needs to be signalled so they can be rescued, which it all turns out that happens, but it turns out the original ship has been destroyed, and their signal has been detected by the tyrants, the people that represent the tyrants, who come to get them. Now, there's all sorts of subplotting going on here. There's like a resentment between two of the astronauts. One resents the other because they served together in Korea, and he somehow did something, and it's not entirely clear, I don't think, that he should have protected people when he couldn't. And it turns out this whole story is a replay of that. So the other guy gets a perspective on what this was all about. So he understands a bit better and is a bit less angry with him, or he is less angry, not angry with him at all. Once he sees the issues that he faced previously, this one's okay. There's some cool outside shots of like moonscape and the stars and space and stuff. I quite like that. I quite like the Grippians. Otherwise, the story was kind of a bit dull. I think it was quite interesting. It's summed up. I looked through my Outer Limits Companion by David Choate and Jeffrey Frenison, and they had a quote from one of the production staff. He goes, "Well, it's always a bit of a problem when we get too sci-fi. It's less fun," and that is the case. This gets a bit too serious. There's not as much fun as you have in the usual Outer Limits episode. This one's one of the weaker ones. And there's nothing functionally wrong with it as such. It just feels a bit protracted. It's the sort of thing they could have done in half the time, honestly. Though I have to say, Outer Limits always kind of stretches its time very well. You don't really notice it. I think, because I've watched some good episodes recently, this one particularly stands out as a poor one. I think this is probably one of the most forgettable ones as well. This is a rewatch for me, I have to say, and I have no memory of this one at all, except perhaps the floaty creatures, but I could not have contextualised that, and without seeing this episode, I just was kind of aware of that look and feel. So, not a great one. I don't think I'm going to say much more about it. It's kind of inconsistent. The ending is okay. There was some interesting special effects, but then some of the other special effects are quite poor. Apparently the original script had quite a lot more spectacular kind of action sequences built in, quite dramatic, but they had to be all cut for budget, so they had to kind of simplify, and make it this what it is. And I don't think anyone was particularly happy with this production, to be honest. The story was Joseph Stefano, the main creative force in the Outer Limits, was kind of involved, but only in, I think, in outlining the story. He didn't write the original script. And the cinematography was a bit flatter than what we used to in the Outer Limits. Outer Limits, you can usually rely on something interesting to look at. And I have to say, this is an episode for looking at rather than being into the script or the characters. The characters are kind of weak. There's one lady in it there's kind of a love triangle thing going on. It's kind of interesting, but it's not. Unfortunately, the lady isn't a greatest actress, but she is putting a lot of energy in it. I'll give her that, and that kind of drives it through. Really, Ruth Roman is the lady in question. So yeah, and it's kind of also a thing about what do you do to stop information falling into the hands of tyrants and things like that. There's some of that too. Not great. I wouldn't recommend this one in particular. Obviously, if you're watching the Outer Limits through, you should watch it, because you should watch it every episode if you're doing that. But otherwise, really not a good standalone episode. Not enjoyable particularly. It was okay. That's about the best I can say for it. Okay, that's me for this time. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to